Think you know history? Think again. Wars are fought with blood, steel, and strategy. But sometimes they're fought with a 500-pound bear who drinks beer, smokes cigarettes, and casually carries artillery shells like they're pillows. Meet Wojtek the Bear. It all started in 1942. Somewhere in the mountains of Iran, a tiny orphaned bear cub was found by a local boy. Sad story, right? Not for long. Polish soldiers, part of the Polish Second Corps, spotted the cub and made a trade that sounds more like the start of a bad joke. Some Persian coins, a Swiss Army knife, a tin of beef, and chocolate. And just like that, a bear became property of the Polish military. Wojtek wasn't just a mascot. He was family. He was trained. He saluted. He marched. He wrestled grown men like it was a casual Tuesday. And when it came time to ship out to Italy in 1943, the British, in all their bureaucratic wisdom, refused to let Wojtek board. Because, of course, war has rules, and apparently one of them was no bears on boats. So what did the Polish soldiers do? They enlisted him. Wojtek became Private Wojtek of the 22nd Artillery Supply Company, complete with a rank, a service number, and a paybook. Now, let's talk about the moment that cemented his legend. The Battle of Monte Cassino, 1944. One of the bloodiest battles of World War II. Soldiers were exhausted, the air was thick with smoke, and in the middle of it all, a bear was hauling artillery shells to the front lines like some battlefield courier from another dimension. The sight of him did something to the men. Morale skyrocketed. They fought harder. And the 22nd Artillery Supply Company made sure Wojtek would never be forgotten. Their new emblem? A bear carrying a shell. And before you ask, yes, he was promoted. Private Wojtek became Corporal Wojtek, a bear, with a military rank. Let that sink in. After the war, you'd think Wojtek would retire to a life of luxury. But no. Poland was now under Soviet control, and Wojtek's unit ended up in Scotland. With no homeland to return to, Wojtek was sent to Edinburgh Zoo, where he lived out his days. His former brothers-in-arms visited him regularly, sneaking him treats. Because, oh yeah, did I mention the bear drank and smoked? Oh, he didn't just smoke. He ate cigarettes whole. He died in 1963. But his story? It refuses to fade. There's a statue of him in Edinburgh, a symbol of a time when war wasn't just fought by men, when a bear became a soldier. The war had another unlikely savior, one who didn't carry artillery shells, didn't drink beer, and didn't smoke cigarettes, but still saved more lives. How? By being faster than any radio, more reliable than any man, and utterly impossible to shoot down. A homing pigeon, G.Y. Joe. It was March 24th, 1943, Algiers. That's when he hatched. But this wasn't some ordinary street pigeon scrounging for scraps. The U.S. Army Pigeon Service took him in, trained him, and turned him into something else entirely. He was given a number, USA 43 SC 6390. Not a name, a designation, because he wasn't a pet. He was a soldier. October 18th, 1943. The Italian campaign was in full swing. British forces, specifically the 169th Infantry Brigade, had just pulled off the impossible, seizing the village of Calvivecchia ahead of schedule. That was the good news. The bad news? The Americans had no clue and were about to wipe it off the map in a full-scale bombing run. The British tried to get a message through. Radios? Dead. Ground messengers? Too slow. Every second that passed brought them closer to friendly fire obliterating their own men. And not just them. Around 1,000 civilians were still inside the village. Their last hope? A pigeon. G.I. Joe was released with a desperate message strapped to his leg. 20 miles to cover. 20 minutes to do it. If he was late, the village was gone. 1 mile per minute. Through open skies, dodging enemy fire, past all the chaos of war. No hesitation. No mistakes. He landed at the airbase just as the planes were about to take off. The message was read. The order was given. The bombers stayed grounded. Over 100 British soldiers were saved. Nearly 1,000 civilians survived. And if you think that was just luck, the British didn't. They knew what had just happened. On November 4th, 1946, at the Tower of London, G.I. Joe was awarded the Dickin Medal, the highest military honor an animal can receive. This wasn't some novelty prize. It was the animal equivalent of the Medal of Honor, and it was given for one reason. He had earned it. After the war, he didn't just disappear. He was housed at the Detroit Zoological Gardens, where he lived to the age of 18. But death didn't erase him. His body was preserved, placed on display, cemented in history. Today, he stands at the Army Heritage and Education Center at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. A reminder. Proof that when human technology failed, when lives hung in the balance, a pigeon was the only thing standing between survival and catastrophe. And if that sounds ridiculous, consider this. He wasn't alone. Thousands of pigeons served in the U.S. Army Pigeon Service. Or a 4-kilogram Jack Russell Terrier with a nose that never lies. His name is Patron, a dog so precise, so unshakable, that Ukraine made him a national hero. His name? It means ammo in Ukrainian. Fitting, because that's exactly what he's been defusing since Russia's full-scale invasion. Hundreds of mines. Hundreds of lives saved, and the war isn't even over yet. Originally, he was meant to be a show dog. That's what his handler, Mikhailo Ilyev, thought. Maybe he'd prance around at exhibitions, win some ribbons, live a comfortable life. But fate had other plans. At 6 months old, Patron proved he had something else, an instinct, a skill set no human could replicate. He could sniff out explosives with terrifying accuracy. Ilyev didn't hesitate. Training started immediately. And it wasn't just for show. Ukraine is one of the most heavily mined countries on Earth. Entire landscapes turned into death traps. Mines buried under roads, inside fields, hidden in homes. The war might end one day. But these weapons, they don't just disappear. They wait. For months. For years. And if you think only soldiers are at risk, think again. Farmers, children, anyone trying to rebuild, one wrong step, and that's it. That's where Patron comes in. His small size is an advantage. Most anti-personnel mines need at least 5 kilograms of pressure to detonate. Patron, he's just under that. He can sniff out deadly traps without triggering them. That means he goes where humans can't, finds what machines miss, and he does it all with his tail wagging. Since the war began, Patron has helped detect hundreds of explosives, mines, unexploded ordnance, traps left behind to maim and kill long after the battle has moved on. He's turned fields of death into safe ground again. That alone would be enough to make him a legend. But his story didn't stop there. He became a symbol. Ukraine's state emergency service made him their mascot. Videos of him working, sniffing out bombs, playing with his handler, wearing his little vest, spread across the world. And just like that, he wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a morale booster, a living, breathing embodiment of resilience. Proof that even in the worst of times, there's still something to fight for. May 2022. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky personally awarded him a medal. Yes, a dog received a military honor from the president himself, and not just any medal, one given in front of world leaders, including Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Why? Because Patron wasn't just saving lives. He was teaching them. Children learned about mine safety because of him. His presence made the horrors of war feel less distant, more real, more avoidable. And if you think this is just a cute story, think again. Patron's work isn't over. Ukraine is still riddled with hidden explosives. The demining efforts will take years. And every minute, every second, someone's life depends on whether those mines are found before they step on them. You think Patron is the only one to break the mold? Think again. The world has seen its fair share of quirky military mascots, but none are quite as legendary or as bizarre as Major General Sir Niels Olav III, a penguin who, no joke, outranks a lot of people. Yes, a penguin. At Edinburgh Zoo in Scotland, this flightless bird holds an official military rank. And not just any rank. He's a Major General in the Norwegian Army. How did it happen? Buckle up, because this is one of those stories you won't believe unless you hear it from the inside. It all started in 1961. A Norwegian officer, Lieutenant Niels Egelian, made the fateful decision to visit the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo. The man was a bit of a penguin fan, apparently. He saw the colony at Edinburgh Zoo, and who knew? Something clicked. By 1972, the Norwegian Kingsguard adopted a penguin and named it Niels Olav. Not after some random penguin, but after Egelian and the King of Norway himself. It was a curious tribute, a touch of whimsy mixed with military tradition. And from that moment, it never stopped. Niels Olav. I wasn't just a mascot, he was a lance corporal right out of the gate. Over the years, he got promoted, sometimes almost on a whim, sometimes for pure symbolic value. First to corporal, then sergeant. In 1993, he achieved the lofty title of Regimental Sergeant Major. His rise was like clockwork. Whenever the Kingsguard visited Edinburgh, they were bound to see his rank climb. But it wasn't all about rank and titles. This penguin wasn't just the face of a military unit. He was an icon. In 2001, Niels Olav I was named Regimental Sergeant Major, and by 2005, he was a Colonel-in-Chief. But you think that's where it ended? Think again. The true kicker came in 2008, when King Harald V of Norway knighted him. Yes, you read that correctly. A penguin got knighted. They didn't just hand him a title, they handed him the full honor, a mark of respect. But the saga didn't stop there. In 2016, Niels Olav was promoted to brigadier, and in 2023, Niels Olav III, the newest in the line, was bestowed with the title of Major General. That's right, Major General Sir Niels Olav III, Baron of the Bouvet Islands. This isn't just some honorary thing. This bird has actual military importance. Not just a pet, not a joke, a freaking general. Generations of penguins have taken on this mantle, continuing the legacy. The ranks, the titles, all passed down from one penguin to the next. It's like some strange avian aristocracy with uniforms, parades, and more respect than a lot of human officers could ever dream of. You think military mascots are just for show? Think again. Bill the Goat is not your average fluffy symbol. This goat isn't just some casual mascot. He's an institution, a living embodiment of the U.S. Naval Academy's entire spirit. And he's been around for over a century. That's right, over 130 years. Since 1893, Bill the Goat has stood proudly at the center of one of the most intense rivalries in college sports, the Army-Navy game. A goat. Think about that. The story starts at the 1893 Army-Navy game. Sailors from the USS New York decided to bring their ship's mascot, a goat named El Cid, to the game. What happened? The Navy won. Coincidence? Of course not. They knew they needed El Cid there for good luck. From that moment, the legend was born. The next thing you know, the goat gets renamed Bill, and every mascot after that was Bill. And not just any Bill. A Bill who could walk the line between beloved mascot and ultimate symbol of naval pride. Now, if you think this is some lighthearted fluff, think again. The use of goats aboard naval ships has a rich history. Goats weren't just cute, they were useful. They provided milk, butter, and yes, helped clean up waste. You really think they just strolled around with their cute little hooves doing nothing? Nope. This is a serious goat. And then there's the legend of Bill. It's ridiculous and absurd, but isn't that exactly what makes it perfect? Some Navy officers, after a pet goat dies on a ship, decide to preserve its skin. Then, as the story goes, two ensigns, on their way to deliver it, decide to stop at the Naval Academy for a football game. What happens next? One of them dons the preserved goat skin like a costume, and the crowd goes wild. And the Navy wins. Because of course, they do. This is Bill we're talking about. Since then, the bills just keep coming. Each one trained rigorously for their duties. And when I say duties, I don't mean standing around in a pen. Oh no. These goats are walking leashes, enjoying peppermint treats, and getting prepped for their role as an icon. You think they're just sitting back, being cute? Wrong. They're the key to Navy pride. Let me tell you about Cher Ami, a homing pigeon who did more for the US Army than most soldiers could ever dream of. Cher Ami was just a pigeon. Born in Norfolk, England, he wasn't destined for greatness. He wasn't even meant to be part of some grand historical narrative. But World War I has a way of making unlikely heroes, doesn't it? Hundreds of pigeons were brought in, trained for the impossible task of delivering messages through hell. But it was Cher Ami who rose above the rest. He wasn't just carrying messages. He was carrying the hopes of over 550 men who had already been written off as lost. On October 4th, 1918, the 77th Division was trapped behind enemy lines in the Argonne Forest. They were under constant fire, running out of food and water, and their own artillery was targeting them. That's when Major Charles Whittlesey had no choice. He sent pigeon after pigeon, hoping for a miracle. First, the birds were shot down. Then Cher Ami took flight. With a message in his leg pouch, he was the last hope. Let me tell you what happened next, and I dare you to believe it. German soldiers saw him coming. They aimed. They fired. They hit him. He was shot in the chest, his right leg almost gone, and his eye was destroyed. You think that stopped him? Not for a second. Cher Ami didn't just fly, he flew 25 miles under enemy fire, injured beyond belief, and he made it back to headquarters in 25 minutes. How? Because that pigeon had something the enemy could never understand: determination. And his message saved lives. His arrival allowed American forces to adjust their artillery and stop killing their own men. 200 soldiers would live because of a pigeon. But don't expect any warm, fuzzy Hollywood ending. Cher Ami didn't make it out unscathed. He died from his injuries just a few months later. But don't think for a second that his sacrifice went unnoticed. He got a Croix de Guerre from the French, and General Pershing himself praised him. This wasn't some small-time war story. This was a true tale of sacrifice. Ready for another story that'll make you question what you think you know about military history? Forget all the stiff, traditional mascots you've seen, because this one's a game changer. I'm talking about Billy the Goat. Not just any goat, mind you. William Windsor, the male cashmere goat who didn't just trot around looking cute. Oh no. He served the British Army's Royal Welsh Regiment in a role that went way beyond the usual mascot title. William Windsor. Now, you might be wondering, what's the deal with goats and military service? Well, let's backtrack for a second. The tradition goes all the way back to 1775. Picture this: the Battle of Bunker Hill, chaos everywhere, soldiers scrambling. And then, out of nowhere, a wild goat appears. This wasn't some fluffy animal prancing around. No, this goat charged onto the battlefield with the Welsh Fusiliers, leading them into battle. That was the start of a legend, and soon every Welsh regiment wanted their own goat mascot, symbolizing bravery, camaraderie, and a serious connection to military spirit. But here's the kicker. Billy wasn't just any goat, he was royalty. Billy's roots traced back to the royal herd at Windsor Castle. Yeah, the same Windsor Castle where the Queen hangs out. Queen Victoria kicked off this whole royal goat thing back in 1837, and ever since, the herd has been providing goats for ceremonial duty. That's the line Billy came from. And in 2001, he officially joined the Royal Welsh Regiment. You thought he'd just hang out in the background, looking cute and being petted by soldiers, right? Wrong. Billy didn't just march around like some civilian at a parade. Oh no. He led parades. This goat was at the front, the headliner, with a specially designed coat that showed off the regiment's insignia. Every time Billy stepped out in public, you could feel the pride. He wasn't just a mascot, he was morale. He boosted the spirits of every soldier who saw him. But it didn't stop there. He made public appearances, becoming the face of the regiment. Talk about fame. Forget all those basic run-of-the-mill military symbols. I'm talking about a bulldog named Bruno. Yeah, you heard that right. Private Bruno. An English bulldog with a title, a role, and a military career. We're talking about a four-legged symbol of Marine Corps pride. But he's no ordinary dog. This is a mascot with meaning, one that represents the Marine Corps' core values of loyalty, tenacity, and pride. So, how did Bruno, this lovable pup, rise to such legendary status? Let me fill you in. Bruno was born on October 22nd, 2022, in sunny San Diego. Cute, right? But don't be fooled. This dog has purpose. He's named after Major General Bruno Hochmuth, the first general officer to be killed during the Vietnam War when his helicopter was shot down. He was known for pushing Marines to be their best, ensuring they received proper training, and making sure they were ready for any mission, no matter how brutal. Major General Hochmuth was a symbol of Marine Corps dedication, so it only makes sense they'd name the mascot after him, right? This isn't just about some cute dog. This is about honoring a Marine who gave his life for the Corps. This isn't some dog just lounging around. Bruno enlisted in April 2023, just 5 months old, and was immediately put to work. What did he start with? Private. Yeah, the low rank, like every rookie. But let's be real, this dog wasn't just hanging out. Within months, he was promoted to Private First Class in September 2023. Then, in July 2024, he leveled up again. Lance Corporal. Talk about a fast rise through the ranks, huh? Not bad for a bulldog who probably just wants to chase a tennis ball. But Bruno isn't just there for the title. This dog has duties. Oh, you think he's just prancing around, looking cute? Not even close. Bruno's out there every single day, representing the Corps in ceremonial duties. Graduation ceremonies? He's there. Motivational runs? He's there too. VIP tours? You bet. But it's not just about waving a paw for the cameras. Bruno's job is to boost morale. Marines on base? They're looking at Bruno to lift their spirits and bring some joy to the grind. Talk about the ultimate mascot. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Bulldogs have been tied to the Marine Corps since World War I. Ever heard of the nickname Devil Dogs? Yeah, that came from the Battle of Belleau Wood in 1918, when German soldiers couldn't stop talking about the fierce, fighting spirit of the U.S. Marines. And what better symbol for that kind of tenacity than an English bulldog? Stocky, stubborn, and tough as nails. It makes sense, right? This mascot tradition goes way back to 1922, when the first official Marine Corps bulldog mascot, King Bulwark, later renamed Jigs, was enlisted.